Yellowstone National Park hides countless secrets within its rocky labyrinths. On October 20th, 2017, these wild lands swallowed up 28-year-old rock climber Tucker Shofield. After a massive search operation covering dozens of square miles of extremely rugged terrain, he was officially declared dead at the bottom of one of the canyons. But the mountains did not take his life. 8 years later, the man was found alive. He was discovered not beneath a pile of rocks, but behind a heavy steel door in a hidden, soundproof basement in a nearby town. When Tucker was found, he did not call for help or rejoice at his rescue. Exhausted and shackled in metal chains, he simply rocked back and forth in the darkness, monotonously humming a children's lullaby. October 20th, 2017, Yellowstone National Park was bracing for the first serious cold snap. Nighttime temperatures had already dropped to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and the first thick layer of snow had settled on the deserted mountain peaks. For most tourists, the season was over, but not for 28-year-old Tucker Shofield. An experienced rock climber, survival instructor, and physically resilient athlete, Tucker was planning a solo expedition. His goal was an extremely difficult, unmarked rock route in the area of Eby Peak, a remote location with brittle volcanic rock, situated dozens of miles from well-trodden hiking trails and any cell service. The peak rose to 10,900 feet, and its slopes were cut by narrow, treacherous couloirs where sunlight disappeared as early as 3 p.m. The timeline of his final morning has been reconstructed in detail based on witness accounts and surveillance camera footage. At 6:30 a.m., Tucker stopped at a local gas station near the town of Cook City. Security camera footage shows him getting out of his black F-150 pickup truck. Cashier Mark Dennis later told police that the young man bought 3 energy bars and 2 plastic bottles of water and paid for his purchase in cash, handing over a $20 bill. According to the cashier's testimony, Tucker was in high spirits. He exchanged a few words with him about a sharp drop in atmospheric pressure and headed toward the park entrance. This was Tucker's last confirmed conversation with another person. At 7:15 a.m., Shofield's pickup truck pulled into an empty gravel parking lot near the start of the Pebble Creek hiking trail. In the visitor logbook, later found by rangers in a wooden box near the trail, an entry written in Tucker's hand appeared at 7:20 a.m. Solo climb, Eby Peak, estimated return time, 6 p.m. on October 23rd. Shouldering his professional gear, weighing a total of about 40 pounds, and a minimal 3-day supply of provisions, he set off into the icy mountains. When Tucker failed to check in at the scheduled time, at 6 p.m. on October 23rd, his family immediately sounded the alarm. At 7:45 p.m., Tucker's sister called the park's dispatch center. A large-scale search and rescue operation began, one that went down in the region's history as one of the most intensive. On October 24th at 6 a.m., a command center was set up at the ranger station. The area was divided into 30 square sectors. More than 50 rangers, about 40 volunteers from Wyoming, and 2 Bell 407 police helicopters equipped with highly sensitive infrared cameras began combing through dozens of square miles of extremely rugged terrain. Dogs from 3 different canine units confidently picked up the scent from the driver's door of a parked pickup truck. Without hesitation, they led the rescuers through rocky scree, thick brush, and extremely steep ascents deep into the wilderness. However, at an elevation of 8,200 feet above sea level, at the very edge of a narrow, rocky ledge next to a gorge more than 300 feet deep, the trail suddenly and inexplicably ended. The dogs simply began circling in one spot, whining and having lost all sense of direction. After carefully searching the area inch by inch, the rescue team found only one piece of evidence: a dropped bag of hand chalk. It wasn't lying on the ground, but in an extremely strange way, was stuck in the dense branches of a dwarf pine about 10 feet above the rocky surface. This detail immediately stumped the experienced investigators. How could a heavy pouch, strapped to a belt, have flown up to such a height and become caught in the branches without the application of a tremendous external force? There were no signs of a struggle, no torn safety gear, no scratches on the rocks that would indicate a person had fallen, and in fact, no body or abandoned backpack. The climber seemed to have vanished into the thin mountain air. On October 25th at 2 p.m., the weather in the mountains took a critical turn for the worse. A cold front moved in from the north, and a powerful snowstorm began. Over the next 12 hours, more than 18 inches of snow fell, reliably blanketing the mountains in a thick white shroud and permanently erasing any microtraces that might have indicated the missing person's direction of travel. The temperature dropped to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Conducting a search at such an altitude became life-threatening for the rescuers themselves. 3 weeks later, on November 14, 2017, the intensive search was officially called off. The park administration issued a terse press release declaring Tucker Shofield missing. The official account stated that the man had died as a result of a tragic slip and fall into a deep crevasse that search teams were unable to reach. Everyone believed that Yellowstone's wilderness had simply claimed yet another human life. But several experienced detectives who had closely examined photographs of the site where the trail ended could not shake a heavy sense of unease. A bag of magnesium unnaturally tossed 10 feet away, the complete absence of micro-relief damage on the rock, and the sudden loss of scent all suggested a completely different, much darker possibility. Everything pointed to the fact that what awaited Tucker on that isolated rocky ledge was not a fatal accident, but a carefully planned trap that had snapped shut before he even had time to take his last step. November 14, 2025. 8 years and 24 days had passed since Tucker Shofield's disappearance. In the town of Gardner, Montana, near the northern entrance to Yellowstone National Park, the morning began with routine work. Police Officer David Miller and Environmental Protection Agency Inspector Sarah Jenkins received a warrant to search an old private warehouse complex. The reason for the raid was abnormal electricity consumption. The local power company had recorded that the abandoned hangar number 4 was consuming over 3,000 kilowatt hours per month. That kind of power consumption is typical for a large server farm, but not for an empty metal warehouse. At 10:15 a.m., the patrol car pulled up to the rusty gates. The temperature was barely 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind was whipping dry leaves across the asphalt. The officers cut through the old lock with bolt cutters and went inside. The interior seemed typical: piles of construction debris, old metal shelving units covered in a layer of dust. However, at 10:45 a.m., while measuring the space with a laser rangefinder, the inspector noticed a discrepancy. The interior length of the hangar was 40 feet, while the building's exterior dimensions were 55 feet. The missing 15 feet of space had been artificially cut off by a solid partition. The officers moved the metal shelving units against the far wall. Behind them, they discovered a false panel covered with old drywall that mimicked a wall. After dismantling several sections with a crowbar, Miller came across a massive steel door set in a concrete frame. The door had no exterior handle, only an electronic lock with a dimly flashing red indicator light. At 11:20 a.m., the police called in a technical team. It took over 40 minutes to break the sturdy mechanism with hydraulic tools. When the steel door creaked open, a wave of incredibly stale, warm air hit the officers. It was a suffocating mixture of the sharp smell of dampness, human waste, and cheap medical antiseptics. Behind the door, a steep concrete staircase began. Turning on their flashlights, the police officers, with their weapons drawn, slowly descended 15 feet underground. They found themselves in a dimly lit basement measuring 10 by 12 feet. The only source of light was a dim lamp on the ceiling, protected by a metal grill. In the far corner of the room, on a dirty mattress thrown onto the concrete floor, sat a human figure. It was a man in a state of extreme exhaustion. He weighed barely 110 pounds. His hair had turned into a single filthy clump. His clothes hung in gray rags, exposing his emaciated limbs. Deep old scars from wearing shackles stood out in vivid red on his wrists and ankles. The shackles themselves lay nearby, unlocked. The man did not flinch at the sound of the door being kicked in. He showed no reaction to the police officer's shouts and did not squint against the blinding beam of the flashlights shining in his face. The exhausted captive merely swayed rhythmically from side to side, like a broken pendulum. He clutched his sharp knees tightly with his hands, and in a monotonous, eerily calm voice, sang an old children's lullaby without pause. The words merged into a stream that echoed off the walls. The unknown man was carefully carried to the surface on a stretcher. At 6:30 p.m. in the intensive care unit, a forensic expert took the patient's fingerprints and uploaded them to the national database. 12 minutes later, a 100% match appeared on the screen. The expert froze. This man, broken by torture, was Tucker Shofield. The news instantly sent shockwaves through the precinct, but it was too early to celebrate the rescue. At 8:15 p.m., Detective Miller received a call from the forensic team examining the bunker. The senior technician reported a detail that turned the case into an active threat investigation. The electronic lock on the door had not been tampered with before the police arrived. Its mechanism was working perfectly. The access log showed that the door had been locked from the outside at 11 p.m. the night before the raid. This meant that whoever had been holding Tucker captive for 8 years had taken the electronic key and deliberately locked him in just a few hours before law enforcement arrived, vanishing into the darkness. Hello, dear viewers. Before we dive into another dark chapter of this investigation, I have a small request for you. Please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and be sure to hit the like button. It's thanks to your engagement and reactions that YouTube's algorithms will be able to promote this video so that many more people will see it. Your support is crucial for creating new content. Now, let's get back to our case. The news of the missing rock climber's return instantly became a national sensation. But for detectives and doctors, the real nightmare was just beginning. On November 15, 2025, at 1 a.m., Tucker Shofield was transferred under heavy guard to a secure psychiatric ward at a hospital in Bozeman. Doctors described his physical condition as critical. According to the official report, the once athletic man now weighed barely 120 pounds. He suffered from an acute vitamin D deficiency and severe muscle atrophy caused by years of forced immobility. However, the most devastating damage was not to his emaciated body, but to his very consciousness. Tucker was in a state of complete and utter dissociation. He could not speak coherently, avoided eye contact with panic, and did not recognize people's faces. Any open space triggered bouts of animalistic panic in him, and bright sunlight caused him physical pain. The nurse on duty, who began her shift at 6 a.m. on November 16th, provided documented testimony. According to her, the patient constantly tried to hide under the metal bed or crawl into the darkest corner of the ward. Any loud noise, whether the clatter of a cart in the hallway or the cautious footsteps of the staff, would cause him to instantly curl up into a ball and cover his head with his hands. It was at such moments that he would begin to maniacally hum a children's lullaby in a trembling whisper. Investigators understood perfectly well that the key to unmasking the criminal lay in Tucker's memory, but interrogating him was absolutely impossible. After the first 72 hours of observation, a team of the state's leading psychiatrists reached a sobering conclusion. This song was not a mere hallucination or a manifestation of madness. It was a powerful psychological anchor, professionally implanted through systematic, brutal conditioning. Behavioral analysis experts noted in their reports that the criminal had used this melody as a harsh trigger for years. It signaled the end of another stage of punishment, or served as the sole indication that water would soon be brought to his cell. Over 8 years of absolute isolation and relentless sensory terror, the brilliant mind and unbreakable will of the 28-year-old extreme sports enthusiast were destroyed. The criminal didn't just keep him in a cage. He deliberately erased his personality, reducing a hardened man to the state of a frightened 3-year-old child, completely dependent on his tormentor. On November 19th at 10 a.m., Tucker's parents arrived at the hospital. The reunion they had prayed for over the years turned into a scene of utter despair. When his mother, in tears, tried to embrace her son, Tucker did not recognize her. According to Detective David Miller, who was present at the time, the man recoiled in horror, fell to the floor, and began singing his lullaby again, pressing his face forcefully into the corner. He did not respond to his name. For him, reality had shrunk to the size of a dark cell, and all-consuming fear remained his only law of survival. Over the next few weeks, doctors tried to stabilize his condition with sedatives. They created an atmosphere of complete calm, drew the curtains tightly, and removed any objects that might make sudden noises. However, every attempt by investigators to show him evidence from the crime scene only triggered new panic attacks. The doctors came to a terrifying conclusion. Tucker Shofield was biologically alive, but as a person, he had been mercilessly killed in that basement. It seemed as though the investigation had reached a dead end, since the main witness was unable to provide any testimony. The police had to rely solely on physical evidence and an examination of the detention cell itself. While the medical team fought to preserve what remained of Tucker's sanity, a team of forensic experts was dismantling the basement in Gardner, brick by brick. On November 22nd at 8 p.m., the lead investigator received an urgent call from the search site. After removing the first layer of the basement's interior lining, the technicians found something that instantly turned the entire course of the investigation on its head. They realized that what they were facing was not simply a sadist's makeshift darkroom, but an extremely complex engineering structure that could only have been built by someone with specialized scientific knowledge. On November 16, 2025, at 8 a.m., the grounds of the old warehouse complex in the town of Gardner were completely surrounded by armed agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The case was officially transferred to federal jurisdiction. A special evidence collection team arrived on the scene. When the forensic experts in white protective suits descended into the basement, they expected to see the typical filthy lair of a serial killer, filled with chaotic clutter and rust. Instead, what met their eyes in the light of powerful halogen lamps caused even the most seasoned investigators to freeze in eerie awe at the cold engineering genius of its creator. This underground space was not just a simple dark room. It turned out to be a high-tech, impeccably designed, and professionally equipped chamber of absolute sensory deprivation. According to the engineers' estimates, creating such a specialized room required tens of thousands of dollars in cash and extremely in-depth construction expertise. Every square inch of the walls, floor, and ceiling was lined with several layers of acoustic foam. This design was guaranteed to absorb absolutely all sound waves. Even if a captive were to scream at the top of their lungs while standing just an inch from the wall, not a single decibel of sound would penetrate the artificial insulation. The ventilation system deserved special attention from the experts. It operated completely silently. The criminal had installed modified industrial air ducts that passed oxygen through a complex system of chemical filters. Air flowed into the chamber steadily, but it had been artificially stripped of any sense from the outside world. Neither the scent of rain, nor the smell of the forest, nor car exhaust. Only sterile, lifeless oxygen. 4 high-quality speakers were intricately mounted within the ceiling. According to system logs discovered on a secure computer in an adjacent technical room, specially generated white noise was broadcast to the captive for hours, and sometimes even days, on a continuous loop. Its volume consistently exceeded 80 decibels. Whenever the noise abruptly stopped, An automatic system would switch to that same children's lullaby on endless repeat. Investigators quickly identified the tenant of this complex. Official documents pointed to 52-year-old Elias Vaughn. A check of the databases revealed a man with no criminal record or history of administrative violations. Vaughn turned out to be a former acoustic engineer who had successfully worked on contracts for classified defense companies in the 1990s. Detectives immediately began interviewing neighbors in the town of Gardner. Their testimonies, documented in the interrogation transcripts, painted a completely different picture. A neighbor described him as a quiet, polite, and neat recluse. According to residents, he never caused any trouble and would occasionally help locals repair small household electronics for free. None of them could have imagined that such a laboratory was operating under the hangar. Analysis of surveillance camera footage at the town's exit showed that Elias Vaughn's car left the area on November 13th at 8:15 p.m., exactly 14 hours before the police raid began. He vanished without a trace, as if he had sensed the danger in advance. A search of his living quarters on the second floor proved a complete disappointment for the forensic investigators. Vaughn had left behind a perfectly cleaned-out space. Fingerprint experts spent over 12 hours using chemical reagents but found not a single fingerprint or fragment of genetic material. The empty metal cabinets gleamed with cleanliness, and the meticulously wiped-clean computer hard drives contained not a single recoverable byte of information. However, on November 17th at 3 a.m., just as the forensic team was packing up their equipment, one of the technicians noticed a massive ventilation grill in the hallway. It was held in place by shiny new screws. After removing it, the agent found a small, fireproof metal box deep inside the ventilation duct. Its door was ajar, and inside lay only a single, neatly folded sheet of paper. It was a sales receipt from a large construction superstore. According to the list of items paid for in cash, Elias Vaughn had purchased acoustic foam, Kevlar straps, electronic locks, and medical equipment in such colossal quantities that they would have been enough to build at least 3 more identical underground cells. On November 25, 2025, the investigation into this case shifted from the mountains of Montana to cyberspace. During a thorough search of the basement complex in Gardner, a technical team from the Federal Bureau of Investigation discovered a hidden adjoining room. It served as a high-tech control center for the deprivation chamber. 3 powerful industrial servers stood on metal racks. Elias Vaughn acted with cold-blooded professionalism. Before his sudden escape, he did not simply delete the files, but physically destroyed all data storage devices. Each hard drive had been symmetrically drilled with a heavy-duty drill in exactly 5 places and doused with an unknown corrosive chemical acid. The remains of the computer equipment were urgently shipped via a special flight to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's main computer forensics laboratory in Quantico. The cybercrime unit, led by Special Agent Robert Gates, spent nearly a month painstakingly recovering the destroyed data fragments. The work was carried out in a clean room using magnetic resonance microscopy, which allowed technicians to read the surviving sectors at the microscopic level. On December 20th at 2:30 p.m., forensic experts were able to decrypt the first 12% of the information. These digital fragments proved more than enough to reveal to investigators the true scale of the former engineer's intellectual madness. According to the Cyber Division's official report, Vaughn was not a typical serial maniac driven by chaotic impulses. The recovered sectors contained a detailed manifesto and an 800-page diary, which the author cynically titled Project Absolute Zero. The former acoustic engineer was utterly obsessed with the concept of forcibly reprogramming a person's personality through radical isolation. In his notes, Vaughn noted that a weak or emotionally unstable mind breaks down too quickly and holds no scientific interest for him. His main experiment required a man with an exceptionally strong will, an extraordinarily high level of intelligence, and excellent, well-honed physical conditioning. Vaughn wanted to prove his theory in practice. He claimed that with enough free time, the right acoustic instruments, and a perfectly soundproofed space, absolutely anyone could be broken and turned into a submissive being. To find the perfect target for abduction, Vaughn spent years lurking on dozens of specialized travel forums and private websites for professional climbers under false names. He used complex chains of encrypted IP addresses, analyzing the psychological profiles of hundreds of users based on their posts and communication styles. In March 2017, his attention finally and irrevocably focused on 28-year-old Tucker Shofield, an experienced survival instructor who regularly published detailed reports on his extremely difficult solo climbs and promoted a philosophy of overcoming fear. He became the ideal target for this experiment. Investigators discovered that the criminal had been obsessively tracking Tucker online for more than 7 months before his physical disappearance in the mountains. Vaughn had successfully hacked into Shofield's smartphone cloud storage. He continuously intercepted data from the athlete's satellite fitness tracker. In the recovered spreadsheets, federal agents found a detailed medical analysis of biometric data. Vaughn knew exactly that Tucker's resting heart rate was 52 beats per minute. He analyzed his lung capacity and recovery rate after peak exertion. He methodically downloaded the coordinates of all his favorite routes and thoroughly studied the schedule of upcoming expeditions. Relying on this impeccably compiled digital data, Elias Vaughn calculated everything down to the minute. When Tucker began planning his October climb, Vaughn created a digital 3D model of Ebby Peak on his computer. He identified a vast dead zone at an elevation of 8,200 feet, where cell tower signals drop out completely. Knowing Tucker's exact average speed over rocky terrain, he calculated with precision the exact day and time when the man would find himself completely alone in a remote section of the mountain, out of reach of any witnesses or rescue teams. The last recovered file in that ominous folder was dated October 19, 2017, exactly 1 day before the climber's physical disappearance. This document turned out to be not just a route map, but a detailed, step-by-step scenario for a forced abduction. When the technicians from the decryption unit opened the final paragraph titled "Camouflage," even seasoned and hardened federal agents shuddered at the chilling realization, finally understanding exactly what role Vaughn intended to play, and with what props, as he waited for his victim above the bottomless mountain abyss. By piecing together the recovered digital evidence, the decrypted technical drawings by Elias Vaughn, and detailed topographical data on the terrain of Yellowstone National Park, the police were able to reconstruct this perfect trap minute by minute. The official report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Behavioral Analysis Unit ran to over 200 pages, each of which described the criminal's unprecedented level of cold-blooded preparation. On October 20, 2017, at 2 p.m., Tucker Shofield was standing on a narrow, rocky ledge. Altimeters, what from which was later found on the criminal's computer, recorded an elevation of 8,200 feet above sea level. The air temperature was dropping rapidly, and at that moment stood at exactly 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The north wind was blowing at 15 miles per hour. The eerie silence of the forest and cliffs was broken only by the muffled whistle of the wind among the fragile rocks. Elias Vaughn, disguised as an ordinary, inexperienced hiker in bright yellow storm gear, had gotten ahead of his target along the trail. According to the investigation files and the kidnapper's own handwritten notes, he had chosen a geometrically perfect spot. It was a section of the trail that local rangers called cursed, a place where the path narrowed to 30 inches, with a deep chasm yawning to the right. Vaughn staged a fatal accident. He deliberately leaned over the edge of the precipice, securely fastening his body to a hidden Kevlar safety rope, hung over the abyss, and began desperately screaming for help. Computer simulation records indicate that he had flawlessly calculated Tucker's psychological profile. A deeply ingrained instinct as a professional rescuer kicked in. Shofield was physically incapable of walking past a person who was a second away from death. As soon as Tucker reached the very edge of the cliff, unclipped his carabiner, and reached out his strong hand to pull the imaginary victim to safety, the trap snapped shut forever. According to documentary evidence from Vaughn's digital diary, the criminal had no intention of engaging in a physical struggle with a much stronger and younger opponent. Instead, he instantly pulled out a modified military-grade stun gun and delivered a precise strike to the athlete's unprotected neck. From the 50,000-volt discharge, Tucker's body went limp instantly. His central nervous system was paralyzed by the powerful electrical impulse. His muscles lost their tone, and he lost consciousness instantly. At that very moment, the bag of magnesium attached to the climber's belt broke free from its fastening and flew 10 feet to the side, getting caught in the branches of a dwarf pine. It was the sole witness to this silent tragedy, which later threw dozens of professional rescuers off the trail. From then on, the 52-year-old former engineer acted with the mechanical, perfectly calibrated precision of a machine. Using a system of professional mountaineering pulleys and titanium blocks that had been prepared in advance on site, Vaughn effortlessly lowered the nearly 200 pounds of the paralyzed body into a hidden, narrow crevice located out of sight from the main trail. According to his precise calculations, there, at a depth of 150 feet below the point of contact, a specially modified, powerful ATV, carefully concealed with camouflage netting, was already waiting for him. Loading the helpless Tucker into the soundproof cargo compartment took only a few minutes. The criminal secured the victim's body with wide straps to prevent damage during transport. The entire abduction process, from the first hollow cry for help to the moment the engine quietly started and the vehicle began its descent, took no more than 20 minutes. Yellowstone's wild, untamed nature became the kidnapper's perfect, silent accomplice. The snowstorm that was steadily closing in on the park that October day was by no means a random coincidence of weather conditions. It was a key, carefully calculated element of Elias Vaughn's diabolical plan. Archival weather reports from that period confirmed that at 3:30 p.m., an extremely intense snowfall began. Over the next few hours, a thick layer of snow, more than 15 inches deep, completely concealed everything. It buried the drag marks left by the body, masked the deep treads of the ATV's heavy tires, and completely washed away any human scent from the surface of the rocks. Search dogs and dozens of experienced rescuers were completely helpless in the face of the elements, desperately searching for a man who had long since vanished. He had vanished like a ghost, dragging his paralyzed victim hundreds of miles along desolate mountain roads. The perfect crime had been flawlessly executed, but federal investigators were left with a new, even more chilling question. How did a man with an unconscious captive manage to cross state lines unnoticed, evade all police patrols and surveillance cameras, and ultimately drop Tucker unhindered into his personal concrete hell? December 1st, 2025. After more than 2 weeks of an intense manhunt that spanned 3 states and involved hundreds of Federal Bureau of Investigation agents, the noose around the fugitive's neck was finally tightened. Former acoustic engineer Elias Vaughn was tracked down thanks to an automated license plate recognition system that spotted his car at a half-empty gas station near Cody, Wyoming. At 11:45 p.m., 3 armored SUVs from a special tactical unit silently approached his sedan. Agents armed with assault rifles instantly surrounded the perimeter, expecting fierce armed resistance or a suicide attempt. Everyone was convinced that a man capable of orchestrating such a complex crime would surely have a bloody backup plan. However, 52-year-old Elias Vaughn did not even lift a finger to defend himself. According to official reports, he slowly got out of the car, placed the keys on the hood, and completely calmly, without a hint of emotion, held out his hands, allowing heavy metal handcuffs to be fastened around his wrists. A barely perceptible, cold half-smile played across his face, that of a man who believed he had already proven his intellectual superiority to the entire world. On December 2nd at 8 a.m., the first interrogation began in the federal building. audio recordings of it would later be included in textbooks on forensic psychiatry as the absolute benchmark of pure psychopathy. The interrogation room was a standard windowless room. Bare gray walls, a massive metal table bolted to the floor, and bright fluorescent lighting. Seated at the table were two experienced special agents from the Behavioral Analysis Unit who had encountered dozens of serial killers over the course of their careers. But what they heard from this quiet, neatly dressed man made even their blood run cold. Elias Vaughn sat upright. His breathing was calm, and his pulse never quickened once during the entire hours-long conversation. During the interrogations, Vaughn displayed a terrifying, utterly icy composure. According to the transcribed transcripts, he categorically refused to admit to being a criminal, demanding that the investigators respect his work. He referred to his horrific actions exclusively as a unique scientific experiment in the field of applied behavioral psychology and extreme brain neuroplasticity. The man spoke quietly and measuredly, with the perfect diction of a university professor, never once raising his voice or shifting his posture in the hard chair. With undisguised pride and delving into the darkest details, he told the detectives exactly how, step by step, he had broken Tucker Shofield's iron will. He described in detail the first 6 months of imprisonment, calling them the phase of initial barrier destruction. According to his words, which were impartially recorded on tape, he deliberately deprived the captive of sleep for 120 consecutive hours. As soon as Tucker's exhausted brain tried to shut down, an automated system would activate piercing ship sirens at a volume exceeding 110 decibels. When the victim reached the point of absolute exhaustion, Vaughn would do the opposite. He would completely turn off the lights and muffle all sounds. He created conditions of ideal sensory deprivation, leaving Tucker in pitch darkness for many days. Deprived of external stimuli, the captive's brain began to work against him, generating visual hallucinations. Tucker completely lost his sense of time, space, and his own identity. Investigators tried to find even a hint of remorse in Vaughn's even tone, but encountered only professional detachment. Elias methodically explained that after the complete destruction of the will, a phase of forming a new, submissive personality began. It was then that he introduced that very children's lullaby. Vaughn would play it very quietly, at the very limit of human hearing, after long periods of acoustic terror, or a few minutes before a meager portion of food was passed through a small slot in the door. He reflexively conditioned his victim to believe that the only source of safety, peace, physical relief, and life itself in this concrete hell was exclusively the voice of his new master and that melody. During the 4th hour of interrogation, Vaughn openly admitted that it had taken him a little over 2 years to completely erase Tucker's personality. He made no secret of his deep satisfaction at having been able to transform a fearless extreme sports enthusiast into a submissive, trembling shadow, stripped of his own sense of self. In the recordings, one of the agents, unable to bear this cynicism, directly asked Vaughn if he had felt even a second of human compassion. Elias Vaughn slowly leaned closer to the microphone and quietly uttered a phrase that caused the seasoned detectives to exchange silent glances. He stated that his experiment had been a complete success, but the police had made a fatal mistake by bringing Tucker into the open. According to Vaughn, he had implanted a final psychological trigger deep within the captive's subcortex, one that no psychiatrist in the world could deactivate, and the activation of this time bomb was only a matter of time. On March 5, 2026, at 10 a.m., a trial began in the Montana Federal Courthouse that captured the attention of the entire country. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Reporters from major television networks, forensic experts, psychiatrists, and concerned citizens who wanted to look into the eyes of the man who had created absolute evil. Elias Vaughn sat at the defense table, showing absolutely no emotion. He was dressed in an impeccably pressed dark gray suit, as befits a former engineer who was 100% certain of his unquestionable intellectual invulnerability. The man showed absolutely no reaction to the bright flashes of cameras, ignored the shouts from the courtroom, and looked at the assembled jurors with the open, icy condescension of a predator. On March 14th at 1:15 p.m., the prosecution presented its main and most shocking piece of physical evidence. The chief prosecutor pressed the play button, and the courtroom was filled with audio recordings retrieved from a recovered computer in Gardner's basement. These were not merely the sounds of brutal physical torture or beatings. This was the methodical, meticulously documented destruction of a human mind. A deafening, unbearable white noise blared from the speakers, which suddenly, without any warning, gave way to absolute, deathly silence. After which, a barely audible, monotonous children's lullaby began. And then, the quiet, broken, animal-like whimpering of a once strong man, desperately begging for a drop of water, or simply pleading for an end to this endless auditory horror. According to the official minutes of the hearing, after 7 minutes of listening, 2 jurors could no longer withstand the psychological pressure. They burst into tears and left the room, and the judge was forced to call a 15-minute recess. Vaughn himself, at that moment, was merely nodding his head almost imperceptibly in time with the eerie melody, as if savoring his own brilliant symphony of pain and suffering. On April 21st at 3:40 p.m., the judge handed down an unprecedentedly harsh sentence. Given the particular cynicism, the meticulous months-long planning, and the incredible psychological cruelty of the crime, Elias Vaughn received 2 consecutive life sentences to be served at the Florence Federal Maximum Security Prison in Colorado. He was sentenced without any right to parole, appeal, correspondence, or any leniency regarding his prison conditions. The federal justice system has spoken its final, irrevocable word, banishing the monster forever to his own eternal cage of cold steel and hard concrete for the rest of his life. But for Tucker Shofield, the primary victim of this horror, this sentence was merely a formality, mere ink on paper. His discharge from a secure psychiatric facility and his official return to his family, which took place on May 2, 2026, proved to be a painful and extraordinarily difficult ordeal for all his loved ones. Physically, he was forever freed from his rusty metal shackles. Thanks to intensive medical therapy, a special high-calorie diet, and daily IV drips, his weight slowly increased to 145 pounds, and his atrophied muscles began to partially regain their function. However, the invisible psychological prison, intricately constructed by Vaughn within his mind, remained completely impenetrable and beyond the reach of any therapist. His parents converted a room for him in their secluded home, located 15 miles from the nearest busy highway. The 150-square-foot room was transformed into a sort of secure bunker. The family spent tens of thousands of dollars to completely overhaul the lighting, installing soft, subdued yellow light without harsh shadows that constantly mimicked evening twilight. The windows were tightly sealed with thick, soundproof panels, so that no sudden noise from the street or random car horn could get inside. A high-quality sound system was installed in the 4 corners of the room. This system broadcasts the soft sounds of nature around the clock without a single second of interruption. The rustle of autumn leaves, the muffled roar of a mountain waterfall, and the distant song of forest birds. All of this was done with just one desperate goal in mind: to somehow drown out his devastating panic attacks and fill the auditory void that Tucker feared more than anything else in the world. This harrowing story has no classic Hollywood happy ending, where the victim miraculously overcomes deep psychological trauma and returns to a full life. The once fearless conqueror of mountain peaks never went near the mountains again. He is terrified of going outside, cannot be left alone for more than 20 minutes, and is completely unable to perceive reality beyond the soft walls of his new room. Leading forensic psychiatrists have officially concluded that the destruction of Tucker Shofield's personality is fatal and absolutely irreversible. And sometimes, late at night, when the house grows too quiet and the artificial wildlife sound system accidentally turns off, even for just a moment due to power fluctuations, the worst begins. Around 3 in the morning, his tormented mother wakes up in an icy terror and, rushing to her son's room, freezes in panic before the tightly closed door. With tears in her eyes, she listens as a quiet, broken voice echoes from the utter darkness. Tucker is sitting on the floor, clutching his trembling knees tightly, and is still endlessly singing that same childhood lullaby, desperately trying to protect himself from the invisible monster in his head. But on one such eerie night, August 11th, through the muffled sounds of the melody, his mother heard something that nearly made her heart stop forever. Tucker suddenly stopped singing, slowly raised his head toward the empty wall, and in the perfectly clear, icy voice of Elias Vaughn, whispered into the void, "I told you, the time of punishment isn't over yet."